And what a way to end. This is a point where we take policy. And it's a shame, indeed, again, from that panel, very powerful panel, that LPG is still viewed as a fossil fuel, or at least painted with the same brush as a fossil fuel. And I think this is where policy comes to call, and policy that is crafted by countries in sub-Saharan Africa to then determine what it is that their country is going to do to ensure that the solutions for deforestation, solutions for eliminating of preventable diseases, solutions for gender equality, solutions to increase or decrease climate change mitigation and hence increase agricultural productivity and secure food availability and affordability of their populace. Solutions for wealth creation, employment and entrepreneurship opportunities. Those solutions must be provided by country policies and not imposed upon by donors who may have vested interest, then secure markets for clean cook stoves, which we know for a fact do not provide any solutions if they're not going to use clean fuels like LPG. And the alternative, in our view, for LPG can only be other clean sources like solar or biogas at the very least. But this certainly cannot be other polluting fuels, because we know that what we would then be doing to the sub-Saharan populace is to defer death and disease, because for as long as a fuel is emitted, then it certainly is not clean. So thank you very much, Max and the panel. I think coming after those two very powerful panels, I'm not sure what it is that, or whether I can catch up with the level of discussions and the strong points that came out. But I would try as much as possible to then tie in policy and the importance of it regarding scaling up of LPG. So let me start just by saying, and I know this is not a class, you're all converted and you're all persons who know what policy is about, what legal and regulatory framework are about, and how these two trigger or are supposed to trigger investments, and specifically investments in LPG. So for countries to achieve and sustain development, generally, just like business entities or just like private sector, governments are guided by economic development blueprints, plans, and strategies. And naturally, these broad growth plans are further broken down to specify the government unit or the government docket that will champion the delivery of the aspired development goal or aspired development strategy or plans or blueprints for that matter. And identical to most East African, actually not most African countries, the government's dockets are mainly referred to either as ministries, actually across board in Africa, and specifically in sub-Saharan Africa. And these ministries are usually the ones that then drive the formulation of policy on behalf of government. And it's never done alone, it's done in collaboration, at least in our case, in most East African countries, and specifically for Kenya. The development of policy is done in liaison with, at the very least, industry associations. And we as a PIEA have participated very proactively and actively with government when it comes to formulation of policy, because the policy is then implemented by private sector, and therefore private sector has a responsibility there and a right to then dictate or at least advocate or converse with government on the best policies that would then ensure that their investments are protected, and that the environment in which they are then going to put in money is actually attractive, and therefore the importance of input of the private sector when it comes to policy formulation. Normally, government assigns or delegates the formulation of the legal and regulatory framework, which is what gives life to the policy aspirations to regulatory agencies and regulatory dockets within the various countries. So, in summary, government policies contain the reasons why things are to be done in a certain way and why. And in the morning, during the early country update panel on the scaling up of LPG, especially during this period since the pandemic struck, our counterpart from Cameroon, Bassem, did cite that it's important for governments to dictate in the policy this certain way of why things are to be done, accordingly. And the certain way, or some of the examples of what's to be done in a certain way, includes, for example, displacing of traditional polluting cooking fuels, connecting homes that use kerosene, charcoal, and firewood to LPG, for example. Deploying X amount of safe cylinders to ensure that there is ease of connectivity and to ensure access and availability of LPG. Other definitions of a certain way, for example, is removal of taxes on LPG and the product itself, and also on LPG equipment and accessories, which include, of course, the cylinders, the hose, the regulators, etc. There's also certain way of policy with regard, or policy directive with regard to enforcement of LPG laws. And I think our counterpart from Ghana cited the fact that during the period when COVID struck and there was the lockdown, there was a challenge in seamless access or continuous or sustainable access of LPG to customers, because then the regulatory framework, which was previously governing the LPG sector, had not made it conducive for the cylinder rotational model to ensure that safe cylinders are actually deployed in homes. And therefore, that lack of clarity on policy and that lack of implementation of the regulatory framework across the country has actually impacted on sustainable access of LPG during this pandemic season. Monga is still the other slide. I'm still on the first slide. So the why, with regard to the government policy, normally is a citation or a documentation that then gives a reason or justification as to why government is dictating that a policy or certain things are to be done in a certain way. So the why could be that we're going to displace traditional polluting cooking fuels. Why? To eliminate, for example, the economic burden of disease and death. And we know that is related to mitigating or reducing, the non-communicable disease impact on a populace on account of use of emitting fuels that are not clean, that are not LPG. The other why would be to sustain environment conservation, or to sustain afforestation programs, or to ensure that countries meet the 10% forest cover threshold as per the UN, standards. The why could also be a justification of the certain way related to climate change mitigation, which could be in this case a why justifying promoting of food security, etc. The otherwise could be to spur investment in LPG when it comes to, say, for example, a policy directive on the non-negotiable enforcement of the law that governs LPG. or even just reforms around the legal and regulatory framework, again, to ensure that there is confidence in investors to then deploy sufficient number of cylinders in the market. So in summary, what we are saying is that no change can occur sustainably on any segment, LPG not being exempt, unless there is documented government directive, which is what we are calling the government policy. And government policies, as Bassem said, are not, with regard to LPG, cannot be domiciled only in the ministries that oversee petroleum or that oversee energy. They must be cross-cutting policy aspirations, directives, strategies, and timelines and targets as well across other policies that are critical in ensuring that there is sustained, non-interrupted, non-disrupted penetration of LPG. And these other policies outside petroleum or petroleum energy, or some have actually specific LPG policies, include the policies within the health ministry, the policies within the environment ministries, the policies within the agriculture ministries, the policies within the manufacturing ministry, because with upscaling of LPG, there is a potential for increasing the demand of cylinders, which means that there is a potential for creating or having investors put money in local cylinder manufacturing plants. Of course, that means there is an increase in opportunities for employment and manufacturing in country, which of course reduces capital flight, and it also reduces, issues of non-employment, etc. There are other policies that are also critical in the upscaling or in collaboration with the parent ministry when it comes to LPG. And that includes the Ministry of Education, for example. If you're talking about ensuring that children do not stay away from school or are not able to do their homework because they have to go out and look for firewood or look for whatever other means other than a convenient cooking fuel like LPG, it means that it will impact on their education. When you're talking about gender equality and the dignity of life, especially for women, all these policies must speak to each other. There must be collaboration, because we have found that when the policies are not aligned across board, then either one of the government dockets that is charged with formulation of policies can drop the baton. And I think we have a good example, for example, in Kenya, where we have had to, on an ongoing basis, lobby and advocate for the National Treasury not to impose any VAT or any taxes on LPG, so that then it continues to be affordable and continues to be attractive and continues to be accessible. And we have had to keep doing that as an industry association. With our latest pitch being last year, when, as I mentioned during the country presentations, the government wanted to impose VAT on LPG. And we had to then again advocate with the help from our parent ministry why it was important for LPG to remain zero rated. So it's important for the policies to speak to each other, especially on an issue such as LPG, which we know addresses a myriad of solutions, and therefore government policies on cross-cutting issues require alignment for consistency in progress and follow-through on policy aspirations, and also on public-private action plans. We can move to the next slide. So as mentioned a little earlier, when I started the presentation, the government policy makers or policy formulators normally assign the legal and regulatory framework formulation to regulatory agencies. And this is because, as alluded to, the policies are actually given life or given traction for implementation by a legal and regulatory framework, because this is the instrument that then dictates what kind of laws need to be put in place specifically, what are the penalties, what needs to be done to maintain order, to resolve disputes, and generally what standards need to be put in place, what laws need to ensure that there is a protection of rights for both investors and consumers. And therefore, it's important that the policies are then given life by regulatory agencies that must have the capacity to be able not only to formulate the laws that then give life to these policies, but that are able to then form the strong foundation upon which countries can manage industries according to national priorities. So it's important to have a sound regulatory framework for that matter. It's important that this regulatory framework is formulated in liaison with the private sector, because this is the stakeholders who then are able to advise the government, whether it's through the policy formulation or the regulatory framework, on what kind of environment they are willing to take a risk in terms of putting in their money. So, as an example, in Kenya, the policy on LPG, the policy directive with respect to scaling up of LPG included one key requirement, which was to reform the LPG segment as an incentive for investors to put in their money. And the first order of business that the regulatory agency did was actually to undertake the regulatory review for purposes of reforming the sector, so as to then provide a conducive business environment, so as to then enable the policymaker to meet the policy aspirations of getting so many number of LPG storage facilities, so many number of safe cylinders in the market, and so on and so forth, with targets which are then reviewed every year in liaison again with private sector, and which then enable the policymaker to track the kind of progress that is being made in terms of policy aspiration targets. And they also facilitate discussions around how to remediate anything that is not flowing as envisaged and that is not being met as targeted within the policy formulation, within the policy that is overseeing the LPG sector for that matter. So on to the last slide, which is basically on investment, and these really are the key drivers: the ease of doing business, protection of intellectual property rights, predictability, because private sector operates sustainably on a predictability, and they're able to actually ensure that their risks are reduced as much as possible by having an environment which is more or less predictable, so that halfway through they do not have to either stop their investments or rethink their business strategy after they have already secured loans, etc., or after they've already rolled out their business strategies. So predictability is key. Trade facilitation is also a key driver for investments. And last but not least, the public-private sector investment action plan. And I'd like to just give an example here with regard to how Kenya has drawn up the public-private sector investment action plan. And this is an action plan that was in collaboration, that was drawn up by the Ministry in charge of petroleum and mining, which is where LPG sits, and the private sector through the industry association. And I think the importance of industry associations such as PIEA cannot be understated, because this is the one voice that is able to negotiate with government when it comes to policy formulation, that is able to negotiate with government when it comes to legal and regulatory framework reforms and formulation and enforcement. It is the one voice that then is able to keep government accountable on what is agreed upon as either policy or regulation, and what is agreed upon as the action plan to trigger, implementation of policy and regulatory framework in order to achieve the country's target in upscaling the use of LPG. So in 2016, the Ministry of Petroleum and Mining, in collaboration with the private sector through PIEA, hosted the first public-private sector forum, which then documented the various policy aspirations of government and broke them down into targets per year, and further broke them down into who was responsible for each of the action plans and by when that action plan was to be delivered. So in terms of infrastructure, we put down what it is that needed to be done, which included incentives coming from government, etc. We then put down what needed to be done in terms of safe LPG cylinder deployment by private sector, which included, as I said, regulatory reforms that would then respect intellectual property rights, so that then brand owners were confident that once you deploy your safe cylinder in the market, you would actually get it back before refilling it and taking it back to the consumer. We then came up with action plans with respect to how do you keep LPG accessible and affordable, how do you educate and sensitize the consumer, how do we optimize the supply chain, what kind of economic incentives are needed to support growth, etc., etc. And now these action plans are reviewed on an annual basis, and where there's a shortfall or where targets are not met, remedial measures are taken. And even if they're not taken always as efficiently as private sector would like, and also as efficiently as the Ministry of Petroleum and Mining and the regulator would like, at least there is a commitment on meeting the targets, late as they may be, but also an opportunity not only for accountability, but an opportunity to then rethink the best methodology to meet the target in the shortest time possible. So that has been the case for Kenya, and I think it has worked very well in the sense that then everyone carries their obligation and their responsibility, knowing that at the end of the day, the beneficiary is the consumer. And we think that this model has also elicited a good private-public sector relationship, and it has also facilitated both interested parties to keep their eye on the goal. And what is the goal? The goal is to increase the use of LPG and to consistently direct any LPG or any clean energy champion to LPG and not to anything that then contradicts the country's agenda on afforestation, on elimination of disease, on climate change mitigation, on food security, on wealth creation, on gender equality, and on dignified life for all through, transformation and access of LPG or any other clean cooking fuel in the interim, but certainly a fuel that does not emit. Unless there's any question, Alfred, I would like to come to the end of my presentation. I don't think I've overrun on time. I have tried as much as possible to stay within time just to catch up and to help Max with his timekeeping. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Wanjiku, for the good presentation. It was quite well briefed. So far, there are no questions on the Q&A section. So, due to time constraint, we'd like to run over to the next session, which is basically the women in LPG, and this is the 5th session. So, we are going to go to the 5th session. If you can be able to click on the stage and then go to the 5th session. We are moving on shortly. Thank you.